Yeah, I know, the world was not exactly calling out for another guitarist to make a video on the CAGED system, but I thought it'd be worthwhile because I wanted to demonstrate some ways in which it's very practically relevant to what you're doing. So rather than just being a theoretical concept, it's a really useful way for coming up with interesting new parts. So if you've ever kind of felt obliged to learn the CAGED system without being completely clear why, hopefully this video will be of use to you. So a brief recap for anyone who's not completely sure. The CAGED system, it's based on an observation that because the guitar is very shape-based, you know, we learn chord shapes and scale shapes without necessarily knowing what the notes we're playing at first, at least. And because of that, there aren't actually an awful lot of shapes you have to learn on the guitar. There aren't that many available because there's only 6 strings and it's tuned a certain way. And the idea is that any chord you learn, no matter how complicated it might sound, you can always relate it back to one of 5 different fundamental chord shapes. And those shapes are C, A, G, E, and D. Hence CAGED, you see, yeah. For example, if we take an F chord like that, everyone's first least favourite chord, because you've got to do this horrible business, barring it. The reason you have to bar it is because there isn't actually an F shape on the guitar. It doesn't exist. What you're playing there, and apologies if this is really obvious to some people, what you're playing there is actually an E shape. You've just moved it up a fret. Because just as we can play an E note and then move it up a fret and it becomes F, we can do the same for a whole chord. We can move a whole E chord up and it becomes F. But of course the open strings don't move up with us, so that's why we need to play a bar there to shift all the open strings up in relation to our chord shape. And then if we can carry on obviously to F sharp, G, G sharp, and so on. And we do that for each of those 5 shapes. You can do exactly the same thing. So A moved up a fret becomes A sharp or B flat, and then B, and then B goes straight to C because there's no B sharp. Let's not worry about why for the moment, it's just one of those things. So you get the idea. Each of those 5 shapes can be played all over the neck using barring. So for this specific example, I'm going to take a very simple chord sequence. I'm going to play E flat, C minor, F minor, and then B flat. So you notice I've not picked a particularly guitar-friendly key, E flat. It's the sort of thing we tend to avoid, because of the tuning. But if you play in a band with other instruments, especially keyboards, you will find the key of E flat comes up quite a lot. So well worth getting used to it. So I'm going to set up a very simple loop, just using those 4 chords to work with. Now you might have noticed that already, even in that relatively simple little part there, we're already really using CAGED ideas. I know, exciting, isn't it? Let me explain. So that first chord, E flat, notice that is an A chord shape moved up the neck. Likewise the C minor, we're playing an A minor shape. F minor is actually an E minor shape moved up, and the B flat is an E major shape moved up. So even if you've just learned these kind of straightforward major and minor bar shapes, you're already using caged principles in your playing. That's all that means, that moving the chords around, as I was saying with the F chord there. So let's consider what options that gives us when it comes to playing some of these chords. So let's take the very first one in the sequence, that E flat major chord. The first version of an E flat major chord that you come across, geographically on the guitar neck, is going to be based on the D major shape. Because if we move that up a single fret, we've changed that to D sharp / E flat. To play the full version of that, you're going to need to bar at the first fret and then play the chord shape with those 3 fingers like that, which isn't massively practical most of the time, but good to know. Then the next version is based on the C shape, and for that you're going to move the bar up to the 3rd fret and then play the C shape with the fingers like so. Then comes the A shape, which we have already used for our rhythm part. That's where you got your first finger on the A string at the 6th fret and then playing the A chord shape there with the 3rd finger. Then comes the G shape. This is where you move the bar up to the 8th fret and then a little bit of a stretch over for the G shape, like that. And then lastly the E shape, which has the bar at the 11th fret and then played like that. So following that principle, you can now play E flat all over the guitar neck. And it might seem that that leaves you with little more than the world's most boring party trick, but there are some very practical uses for this, which I'm going to attempt to demonstrate. So a reasonable first question people might have is, why would you want to or feel you need to play the same chords in a different place on the neck? Well, if you remember that part that I recorded there, you'll notice because of the nature of it, because we're moving from completely different areas of the neck, there's a kind of a stop-starty sort of a feel to it. We can't link them together completely smoothly because we're having to change position. And that might be exactly the sound you want. There's nothing wrong with it, but it might not. You might want to be able to link the chords together a little bit more seamlessly than that. But the other thing that might happen, which is possibly more common, is you might be playing in a band with another guitar player who's already doing that, and there's little point you doing the same chords in the same way in the same place because you're adding next to nothing then. Whereas if you apply a little bit of this cage stuff, you can really complement the part that's already there with something a little bit different, which is what I'm going to try and do now. So what I'm going to do for my additional part here is I'm going to base it around that G shape version of E flat, where we were barring at the 8th fret, which might seem a bit of a brave and possibly foolish chord shape to start with, but it does enable us to create a much more smooth version of that same chord progression that we had there. Because if we move from that G shape to an E minor shape, that is another version of C minor, the second chord in the progression. And you'll notice we're not having to move anywhere near as much to go from one to the other. From there, to play the F minor, the next chord, very simple in this position, you keep the bar in the same place and you move to an A minor chord shape. And then for the B flat, the last chord in the progression, bar in the same place, we play a D chord. A D shape, I should say, excuse me. So we're going... Now, if you're the sort of person that likes to play chord progressions like that, then absolutely all power to you. I certainly can't be bothered with that. It's much too much like hard work. That bar across all those shapes is just too restrictive for me to play with any kind of expression or imagination. So I'm going to use a capo. Okay, so I've now got the capo on at the 8th fret. And yes, I do say capo, not capo. That's just the sort of guy I am. The capo is now doing the job of the bar. So then I can play those same shapes with a little bit more freedom. So I'm playing the G shape, E minor, A minor, and then D. So just to reiterate a really obvious point, even though that feels like I'm playing G, E minor, A minor, D, it's not. Because of the position on the neck, that is E flat, C minor, F minor, and B flat. And then we can complement the part that's already there, hopefully a little bit more stylishly. Like so. So if this is a relatively new thing for you, the way I would suggest practicing it is like this. If you take a chord progression of a song you've already learned, maybe that uses open chords, let's say for example a D, try and find some other places on the guitar neck where you can play the same chords. So if we take D for example, we'll use one of the other caged chord shapes, so let's say A, and if it is new for you, you might find initially it's a little bit of a painstaking thing where you're counting up one fret at a time, and that's absolutely fine. You just take whatever chord it is, whatever chord shape it is, and move it up until it becomes the chord you want. So if we take A, and we're looking for D, we move it up one fret at a time, becomes A sharp, B, C, C sharp, D. So you found another way of playing D at the 5th fret using the A shape. And you might find that by doing that, you prefer the sound of the chords played in a different place on the neck. You might equally find it sounds like a complete train wreck of an idea, and that's fine as well. Just all about giving yourself some options. Really useful for collaborating with other people as well. So yeah, I hope that was of some use. If you've enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing. And if you've got any other requests for things for me to have a go at, then please put them in the comments. Thanks ever so much for watching. Cheers, bye.